You are listening to The Thought Leaders Show with the world's cutting-edge, hottest innovators, influencers, and impact makers today. If you are looking for inspiration and motivation, listen in. Welcome to The Thought Leaders Show. Now, here's your host.
Hi, this is Tammy Patzer, and I'm excited today to be speaking with Victoria VANNES. She was born a natural healer. This gift from the source, creator of all things, was realized when Victoria met Guruji Mahendra Trivedi in 2010. Under Guruji's nurturing and blessings, Victoria's potential for healing has expanded. Her ability to harness life force energy has been scientifically validated, documented, and published in international peer-reviewed scientific journals. And today, Victoria and I are going to have a conversation about a topic that for many of us is very painful yet revealing, and that topic is shame. So Victoria, tell me more about shame and what it means. And then, of course, I know many people are going to be maybe shocked or stunned at what you're going to say about the value of shame.
Yes. Well, Tammy, thank you so much for having me to share a little bit about the power of shame for growth. And shame is such, a self-conscious emotion that many of us avoid that pain of shame and run away as far away as you can get from that. But I thought I'd start with just Webster's dictionary definition of what shame is. So we're all on the same page as we go further discussing shame. So according to Webster's dictionary, shame is a feeling of guilt or regret or sadness that you have because you know you have done something wrong. It's about the ability to feel guilt, regret, or embarrassment. And those feelings also kind of tag onto shame. And it's dishonor or disgrace. So that is so powerful and so painful to walk with shame. And like I said, I think most people, when you feel and you get that flush in your cheeks and your heart starts to race a little bit, and you start feeling that pain. Shame definitely brings pain, and most of us want to escape that. But what I believe is that shame is the tool, is the emotion that can really help us learn and grow into our better selves. So walking with shame, feeling the pain, and moving through that and using that pain as motivation, it can then help you grow into a better self. So unfortunately, if you talk about shame to most people, it's really one of the most dreaded emotional experiences, I think, across the board. Shame is hard to feel in your own being, and it's really hard to watch someone else be shamed also.
Because I've witnessed it and I don't know if it's a cultural thing, that shame is handled in different cultures in a different way. But I know that coming from, living in the United States, whenever I've witnessed someone being shamed, I don't know how to react, when it's an adult. Normally with a child, if they're being shamed, people, as a child, I remember, like if some kid did something and then they were shamed in front of the group, there was a reason for that. And I remember in my little head making judgments on whether or not the kid deserved it or not. and
Right.
and then, of course, as an adult, you're more almost like a witness to something, and it's almost like you're not in a place of being a judge of it, because um, you know, uh, again, as you get older, you learn, different things. You're more of a witness to the shaming. So it's very interesting. Please continue.
Sure. And I think you bring up a good point that as adults, we're really uncomfortable in shame in adults. We don't know how to handle it. We're much more comfortable in shame with children because we see it then as what it really is, a teaching tool. And if you think back in, our ancestors, let's say many, many generations ago, let's say tribal, the shame of shaming someone in the tribe was so important because you needed them to follow the conventions of that little tribe in order to make sure everybody survived. So shame was super powerful, super important. That idea of being so shamed and shunned and sent out of your tribal group, that meant death. So shame must, I think, for us still feels that way. It's almost that powerful as our ancestors used it as, the way to maintain the balance in the tribe and to make sure everyone followed the conventions. And being shamed and maybe possibly shunned could lead to death. So shame brings up such powerful things. But I think the correct way to look at it is to look at it how you would shame a child into learning the appropriate behavior and to learning about oneself, to take that shame, take that pain, use it as a motivation to look inward and see, there's a disharmony there between what you feel shame because you've done something wrong, you've broken some way of your value or your ideal self, and you're not matching that ideal image or self of where you want to be. And shame is your tool to tell you, hey, you really messed up and there is something seriously wrong and you need to do the inner work to find out what that is. And I think that healthy discomfort that shame brings, you can see it as like a healthy discomfort that then can lead to growth. And I just want to share an example of shame that I just recently had. I was flying on a domestic flight in the United States, and the whole rules for safety, the stewardess were there and they did their whole demonstration of the seatbelt and the oxygen mask that drop, and all the seats had to be up and the trays in their upright position. And of course they asked for you to turn off all your electronics, particularly for the takeoff, which is a matter of safety for everybody on board. So it's sort of like that tribal response. This is all about, this is our safety as our little tribe on the plane. And this one stewardess started to walk down the aisle, and she stopped in the seat in front of me. And she looked over and she saw this woman had like a tablet out and was doing something. She was like, ma'am. And this woman looked up and I'll just describe, she wasn't like a young teenager being rebellious or someone who wouldn't know what the rules and regulations are. She was well dressed. Her hair was done very well, perfect makeup. She had 3 rows of diamond rings with her wedding band. So she was wealthy enough, educated, I could tell by the way she spoke. So she looked up at the stewardess and she said, oh, well, yeah, I was really trying to get away with it. And she admitted she was doing something wrong. And the stewardess just looked at her, shook her head, and said one word. She said, shame. And I was just about to applaud it because I was like, yes, it is so appropriately used. Shame, for shame. And I was like, that's it. That was so wonderfully and well said by the stewardess. And the woman was like, yeah, she accepted it. She closed down what she was doing. She put it away, and she was appropriately shamed. So some people may have looked at it and been uncomfortable, but I looked at it as, yes, this was an appropriate use of the word shame and a learning opportunity for this woman to say, okay, yeah, why am I thinking I can, go ahead and get away and break the rules right here and now against the safety of all? So I just thought that was really important that I witnessed that.
Yes, and it's interesting because in that particular case, that woman was being very selfish in terms of, she was thinking, oh, what does it matter if I break this rule? And how many people are on that airplane? Anywhere between 100 and 300 people that could be endangered because of one woman's idea that she doesn't have to play by the rules. And then that example of using, for shame, that is an appropriate use of that terminology. And it sounds like the woman understood it and accepted it because she got the point that she was not above that rule. So many people think that they're above the law or above the rules. And of course, these rules are made for safety purposes, just like you said. That's a really good example of that. And it's interesting when you think about how many people fly and all those little things like, put your bags under the seat, or they have to be locked above so that they're not loose. Because think about it, like if you had your purse or your laptop holder out and it's not stowed properly, and you did hit turbulence or something, and that thing becomes a missile or a giant weight. I know that my laptop container with the extra batteries in it, that
Yeah,
could be a weapon. That could hurt somebody, if it
exactly.
um
Exactly. So here's the opportunity for this woman who got called out publicly for shame, for
yes.
shame on you. And I think, in the adult American culture, what could she do? Well, she could bluster against it, and in her head, she could be, well, that's just awful. She's just calling me out. And you can do all these things. And I think Americans are particularly good at numbing themselves down from harder emotions like shame, which is painful. So, like, you might eat too much if you start feeling shame and you can't deal with this disconnect between your way you are acting and behaving and who you are and the ideal of where you want to be as a good person, let's say. So in sort of walking with this pain, you try to numb yourself down to the pain, and often people might eat too much, or they might sleep too much, or they might work too much, or they'll watch excessive TV or drink or use drugs or gaming or any other kind of drama just to numb yourself down and hide yourself from the pain of shame. But shame has actually been studied by psychologists to see how it works differently than just guilt. Guilt seems to kind of come with shame, but guilt, in this one study, they were studying guilt and shame. And guilt did not, the feeling of guilt did not lead to the motivation to make real change in oneself, to better oneself. It was shame. Shame was the feeling, was the emotion that actually led to the motivation. And I'll just share a little bit about what the study, what the authors of Shame and Motivation to Change the Self found. That shame definitely was a stronger prediction than guilt or regret. for the motivation for positive self-change. And what they found that was kind of unique about shame is that it was associated with the motivation to change the self above and beyond, the moral self-blame and what you might have done as harm to others. So like in guilt, you could say, oh, I'm so sorry. And I was at a little concert recently in like theater seats, and this guy walked by, sort of as the song was ending, and he didn't realize it, but as he walked by, he actually spilled this woman's drink that was in a plastic cup, and it spilled on her and her seat. And she jumped up, and I was like, I didn't understand what had happened because he had mostly moved on by then, but it had unbalanced it, and then eventually it fell on her. And, I'm handing her tissues to try and dry her pants and the seat and all this drama, and she finally sits down. And when he came back through, she stopped it and said, hey, did you know when you walked by, you spilled my drink on me? And he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'll go buy you another drink. That's guilt. And that's not going to motivate, I don't know. Did he feel shame with it too? Maybe. She could have said for shame to him. And maybe the difference would be is not only would he have like tried to buy the drink, but then he would have like done a little looking deeper in himself to see, what he could do in himself to make changes. Maybe that's just guilt. That seems like lower order. Like that's just guilt. He made a mistake. Shame is something deeper. And so I think when they were looking to see, they weren't that surprised to find that guilt isn't the motivator for change, but that shame really is. And why they were looking at why guilt is lesser of an emotion and why shame is so powerful of a desire for self-change. And they found that possibly it's because we can apologize and make, things right when we feel guilty, like, hey, I'll go buy you the other drink, sorry, kind of thing. And we're less likely to then make lasting changes in ourselves. But the potent thing about shame is that it really is an indication of readiness to address the disharmony, the disconnect between who we want to be and who we are right now. And that motivation comes from that pain, that conflict in ourselves, based on our vision of our higher self, who we could be, our best self, and where we really are. And the motivation then to do some internal reflection and consciously looking at ourselves. And with that, then we can work past shame, walk with the pain of shame, and by evaluating ourselves honestly and then working to live our lives more closely than to the highest ideals that we have for ourselves. If we deny shame or hide from it or just try to smooth it over, and I know if you went to friends and you felt shamed in some instance, how many of your friends would say, oh, it's okay, you don't have to feel bad about that, you're a good person. How many of them, a real friend would say, wow, okay, maybe you need to look a little closer. If you're feeling shame and you're feeling the pain, take the time to walk with that and look a little closer and do some honest evaluation of yourself and see, walk with it for a while and see where you go. Where are you going to end up walking with this pain?
I think that's a really good point that you're making about when you are ashamed and you're feeling that pain, if you stop and do that self-reflection about why are you feeling this great shame or this great regret. And I think you're right about that. Guilt is different because I don't know, like what you said, I don't know that guilt always makes you want to fix something. You might feel guilty about, saying something mean to someone, but if you never take action to fixing it, or why would you act in a certain way, then where is their growth? So is shame something that obviously it's deep and it's painful and it makes you look at yourself and your actions? Is shame something that helps people, motivates them to a bigger growth, like to make changes for the better? And it's almost like shame is not superficial. It's more at a inner soul level, almost, where this transformational growth seems to happen. Am I reading that right from?
I think so. I think that in these studies, that's the part that they skip. Yes, guilt, you'll say you're sorry. Hey, maybe I'll buy you the drink I spilled. Shame though goes so deep, and I think that's the key. It goes to your soul. It goes to your spirit, because your spirit is calling you to live your highest and best self, to live up to the highest ideas of honesty and, hardworking and purity and being a truth teller and doing right in the world. And shame is the tool, I think, the calling to your soul for you to do the self-critical reflection of your being and doing the hard work of being really honest in it and digging really deep. And that's the kind of work we try to avoid, I think. We like to live on that superficial surface, hard for me to say, and just, and just really, if you get a little hard knock, you don't want to deal with it too much, okay, and you try to cover it up and smooth it up and just kind of continue along on a very surface level. But shame requires you to dig deeper. I think that's the beauty of shame. I think that's the gift of shame, that working with that pain and holding it and living with it, it will require you to move deeper into your soul, into your spirit, and see where you are going wrong in your life. And what can you do? What will really change, make real change to lift yourself up, to bring yourself into higher consciousness, be more aware of where you are honestly in your life and not be deluded and not walk with delusion about, hey, I'm just fine, I'm a good person, that type of thing, but actually require you to do the work of delving into oneself, looking honestly, being very critical, and then how motivating you on how to change what you need to change to grow and reach those higher ideals that your soul and your spirit is calling you to do. It's asking you to live up to your values and really be able to create the change in ourselves to our higher good.
It's so interesting because, we're talking about some shame being part of, think about the example, the lady on the airplane trying to get away with using her laptop, yet she did something that was shameful in terms of she was being selfish,
Right.
But then when you talk about it at that deeper spiritual level about, that's pretty heavy duty, deep stuff. When you talk about, to feel shame, to help you to see who you are and to reflect at this spiritual level. And I think for most of us, and I'm most of us, me, I'm using myself as an example. I know that in all of my life's challenges, I don't know that I was ever conscious of dealing with myself or my problems at that spiritual level, or saying, this is going to help me to grow to be a higher conscious person. I don't know that I ever thought like that. I was always just going like, I've just got to survive, I just got to
Right.
make it day to day, make ends meet, take care of my kids, and be a good person and be honest and be truthful. But I wasn't ever thinking about what that was me at my spiritual or soul level. I was just always looking at it as my, outside world level, I guess. Do you have any examples of
Yes.
shame?
A productive shame.
Yes.
Yes. So the productive shame is really where I think, if that first, just that small example I gave of the woman on the airplane and the stewardess saying shame, if she wanted to look a little deeper as to her arrogance and her self-centeredness in that moment and see where that would take her and see how far that would delve inside herself and what would come up for that. For me, I had a rough example that really brought shame and the power and the beauty of shame alive for me. And that was, I got fired from a job. And I had all my ego involved in that. And I was like, I can't believe this. Oh, and it sent me to rock bottom in misery. And it was a misery I was creating for myself because I just kept bumbling around in the muck. And I was so ashamed of it that I couldn't even tell my daughters that I had been fired. And it just brought up lots of things for me to work through. So it took about a week of bumbling around in the muck before I lifted my eyes up and was like, there is a lesson to be learned in this. I need to really delve deeper into this pain of shame, and particularly shame, and to walk with that and see where that was going to lead me. And so it was a painful walk and I honestly admit the part I couldn't take it for feeling this for all this time. And I started to watch, I hadn't watched TV. I started to watch a little TV just to take myself out of it. I could feel how that was just numbing, like a little bit of Novocaine to the pain. But the pain was still there, and it wasn't going to go away with just a little bit of Novocaine. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to buckle down. I'm just going to feel and walk with this pain. And I walked with it, and it brought me so much more insight. And it turned out to be the most precious, beautiful jewel I've ever felt as an emotion, shame. And ultimately, I was able to walk through to the other side of it. And it's too numerous and so many things that were just incredibly revealed to me and encouraged me and motivated me to change my mind and change my perceptions and change the delusion I was operating under. It just was a huge shift, powerful shift for me. And something that I wanted actually to make a good point to my daughters, because like I said, I didn't even tell them at first that I had been fired. I was so ashamed of it. And like, and all kinds of excuses. You come up with all kinds of silly excuses. They depend on me. How could they see me and being fired? That kind of silly stuff. So it took about a week to start to really walk with the pain and move through the emotions and trying to find my footing, and until it really flipped my whole perception. And I really saw what a beautiful thing this firing was. And truly, in everything, everywhere you look, and what you might think is the most horrible and ugliest moment, there are truths, there are great lessons to learn. And so I called up each of my daughters separately and I said, oh my gosh, I have really wonderful news to tell you. And it was in that tone of voice, like with excitement and joy, because that's where I was. And I called my oldest, who's, a senior in college, and I said, guess what happened? I've just had this wonderful thing happen. And she's like, what? And I said, I got fired. And there was silence. And she was processing it. I didn't say anything. And then she said, well, I guess all things happen for a reason. I was like, exactly right. And I went on and shared a little bit about, my insights and what I had learned, and that um, the example I was hoping to leave with her is that, even in the hardest times and things that look super challenging and feel painful, like shame, it's the greatest opportunity for growth, because it can motivate you to shift you into that calling of your spirit to become better, to become your higher self. And I did the same thing with my youngest daughter, and she too had this silence, and she sort of was like, okay, and everything's okay, and I'm like, yes, and sort of wanted to give that same, you know, lesson to her that, you know, these hard lessons will come in life, and that shame is such a beautiful, and that's what I would want to leave people the message with, is that shame shouldn't be something like is a hot coal, like you don't want to touch it, that you want to run away from it, like you don't even want to see the stewardess on the airplane use that word shame on that woman. No, we should really relish that tool, the beauty of shame, and honor it as a high emotion, that the power of shame can motivate you to really, really reevaluate who you are, where you are in life, and to feel the calling of your soul, to feel the calling of your spirit. And shame is the way, a good tool to motivate yourself to do the hard work of self-reflection and then create the change that you need to become that higher self. And when you walk through shame and you walk with pain and you come out on that other side, you are going to feel glorious.
That leaves me nearly speechless, but of course I have to talk because
I know. It's just,
but
I'm just radiating so happy because I'm so happy I've had that experience in my life. I'm so happy I had to walk with shame and that pain, because it truly, in the end, changed me for my better.
well,
And honestly, I've probably tried to avoid feeling shame in many, many parts of my life when I look back.
I'm sure most of us do try to avoid shame because we see the negative side of shame. But I think today, and I can hear it and I can feel it coming through the airwaves, you're 100% sincere that you're saying, hey, it's like walking through hell. And you walk
Yes.
through hell, and guess what? When you walk out on the other side, it's like you made it to heaven. It's that type of a night and day thing.
Right. I don't know that I would say I made it to heaven. I
Well,
would say I walked through the fires of hell, and it forged me to be a different person.
wow.
It made me look so much harder and more critically at myself, and it changed me. It changed me in the most amazing, unexpected way. And I see now shame as a joyful. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful jewel. It's a beautiful tool for us to use to listen to the higher calling of our spirit, to please grow. And shame is the tool to motivate us to that call.
Wow, Victoria, I've interviewed you several times, and I have to say that your transformation and your description of shame today is, uh, again, it's leaving me like speechless in terms of the value of this. And I would tell the audience, you're going to want to listen to especially this last 5 minutes or so, when you're talking about that difference, because of the energy that you're sending out about the difference, that transformation of shame And it's something that you've really captured what shame is, and the power and the goodness of it, on this journey, this life journey that we have. So that's really beautiful. So Victoria, if somebody wants to reach out to you and connect, what's the best way to do that?
Best way is to take a look at my website, and it's just my name, Victoria VANNES, and there they can find all the information they would need.
Okay, victoriavannes.com, and go to the website. There's a phone number, there's email, there's different information about science and testimonials and media, a blog. And of course, you can find out more about Victoria and how she can work with you. Again, this has been a really great conversation, Victoria, because you really gave me insight into shame that I was always afraid of shame until you described it today. And because we all have those experiences. I mean, I bet every single person, unless you're just, gifted, has had been fired or had to quit something, or had an experience of being checked, like that woman, on the airplane.
Right.
Something very simple like that, all the way to, being fired is never fun, but it can, like you said, it led you to this self-evaluation and helped your growth as a person. Yes. So that's really phenomenal. And I think about the value to your children, to your daughters. They actually were given a gift too, say, where you said, hey, this happened, but here's the gift I was given because of this. Most people think of being fired from a job as the most awful thing that could happen, Right. Sometimes it's the best thing that could have ever happened to you, because then you move on to something. And normally, I know in my life, whenever something has happened that I thought at the time was a negative or a shameful situation, it's always opened the door to something much bigger and better, because I become, like you said, you change and you blossom into this better, higher self that you're trying to develop, as you grow anyway through life. So it's a very beautiful. And again, I highly recommend everyone. You're going to want to listen to Victoria talk about this again. So you're going to want to replay this, because there's so much gold in this conversation today that you're going to have to, listen to it a couple times to get all the nuances, because it's really a lot of layers and nuances to listen to. And if somebody has something going on in their life and they're dealing with shame, I think what you said will really help them get a grasp on the value. Mm-hmm.
What a gift shame is.
Yes.
And the power of walking with the pain of shame and doing the self-evaluation and really listening to the call of your spirit to become more and better than you really are. And you just have to do the work. And believe me, if you really honestly do that work and walk with the pain of shame and really listen to your spirit, then on the other side is joy. Just joy. Because you've changed and you've evolved and you've transformed.
Well, that's, again, beautiful. VictoriaVannes.com. Everyone, this is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
You've been listening to the Thought Leaders Show. To get all past shows and to get all future shows, go to thoughtleadersshow.com.